Hello and welcome to the weekly current affairs session. So, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, please respond if I am audible clearly to everyone. And I think that you all must be aware about our this weekly initiative. So, every day of the week, we discuss the most important current affairs topics with you related to different subjects. On Thursdays, I, Snigdha Singla, take these topics related to IR or history part, art and culture part with you, right? So now we have modeled this initiative based on the mains preparation. Although it will be very useful for you for preparing for prelims also, but for those who are appearing for mains this year or next year, the discussions here will be very detailed and analysis based, right? So now let's begin today's discussion, and the topics of today's discussion are going to be these three very important topics related to your international relations part of GS paper 2, right? So the first topic that we will discuss in detail is regarding your BRICS and the recent summit, that is the 14th BRICS Summit that happened in this preceding week, right? The second, we will talk briefly about the G7, its relevance and its summit that also happened in the preceding week. And finally, a very important initiative launched by G7 itself. This we will discuss in detail and its strategic relevance in the current geopolitics of the world. That all we will discuss in this session, right? So let's begin the discussion now that I am audible to you all. So the first topic for today's discussion is going to be the 14th BRICS Summit, right? So before starting with the 14th BRICS Summit itself, let's first understand the basic details of BRICS, right? So सबसे पहले what we want to know is that when, why, how BRICS was established. So BRICS is basically an international grouping of 5 countries, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Right? So it's an international grouping of these 5 countries. How did the BRICS originate? So firstly, in 2001, the acronym BRIC was designed or given up, right, signifying the 4 most economically fastly growing countries in the world, having the most economic potential in the world, right? At that time, these countries were the leading economic horses of the world. That is why this acronym, that is equivalent to BRIC, showing the economic strength of these 4 countries, was got birth, right? So now over the years, reaching at 2010, the South African nation also joined the grouping and the race of most developed or fastly growing economic countries, right? So now the composition of the grouping is comprised by these 5 countries, right? So this grouping as a formal international association was established in 2009, starting with the BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India and China, and then in 2010 South Africa was also added to the grouping, right? So now the members of the grouping are these 5. Please try to remember the members. They are easy to remember by the name itself, can be useful in answering prelims questions, right? So now this year the summit of BRICS happen. Summit are yearly meetings, you can say, between all the groups that are there in the world. देखिए बहुत सारे groupings होते हैं. You have SAARC grouping, you have ASEAN, you have APEC, you have G20, G7. There are many groupings. They can survive only if they कीप मीटिंग एट रेगुलर इंटरवल्स. ठीक है, जैसे आपकी दोस्ती कब तक रह सकती है आपके बेस्ट फ्रेंड के साथ? ओनली व्हेन यू ट्राई टू मेंटेन दैट कॉन्टैक्ट विद दैट पर्सन. या तो आप उनसे मिलते रहें या फोन पे रेगुलरली बात करते रहें, अदरवाइज रिलेशनशिप धीरे धीरे खत्म हो जाता है, डाइल्यूट हो जाता है. इन द सिमिलर मैनर, to keep the grouping relevant, any grouping requires to meet periodically, right? That is what is a summit. That is what is a summit meeting of any grouping, right? Now this year, that is 2022, the summit of BRICS, 14th summit of BRICS happened, and that happened in China this year. राइट. सो सी 2009 से लेके वैसे तो टेक्निकली 13 समिट होने चाहिए, बट मे बी देर वर मोर देन वन समिट्स इन अ सिंगल ईयर. दैट इज वाई वी हैव 14th summit now happening, right? So the theme of this summit can be asked in prelims of various government examination. That is why this is important. The theme of this summit is foster high quality BRICS partnership, usher in new era of global development, right? The BRICS need to partner to ensure around the globe development, right? So that is the theme of this grouping. So now, as I told you, the notion behind the coinage of the term BRIC was to show the countries that dominate the global growth, that will dominate the global growth by 2050. ठीक है, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया कि इन कंट्रीज को ये एक्रोनिम क्यों दिया गया था, बिकॉज दे आर और दे वर एंड दे विल बी द फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमीज ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. ठीक है, टुडे ऑल्सो यू सी चाइना इज द फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी, इंडिया इज ऑल्सो वन ऑफ द फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी. सो दैट इज वाई दिस ब्रिक्स गॉट इट्स नेम एज अ ब्रिक institution, right? Now let's see what is the relevance of BRICS. When it was established, what was the relevance then, and what is the relevance of BRICS now, right? So the very first relevance of BRICS is that it contributes to global growth, trade and investment, right? आप देखिए, we are discussing that BRICS constitutes the fastest growing economies of the world. Fastest growing economies, right? So that means if they are the fastest growing economies, that means the trade will be very high in these countries, the level of investments will be very high in these countries, right? So the flow of money will be very high in these countries, right? So that means for the entire world they constitute as the major pillar of इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज. जितनी भी आप ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी में ज़्यादातर ट्रेड, इन्वेस्टमेंट, एक्सचेंजेस देखेंगे, दैट विल बी विटनेस्ड मेजरली इन दीज कंट्रीज. बाकी कंट्रीज में भी होगा, ऐसा नहीं है बाकी कंट्रीज में नहीं होगा, बट मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द मनी विल बी फ्लोइंग टू दीज कंट्रीज और थ्रू दीज कंट्रीज, right? So these are very important for the entire global economic order, right? So that is why these are the very first relevance of BRICS is that it dominates the global economic order as being the major conduit or the central point of all the economic transactions around the world, right? Right? The second relevance of this grouping is that it provides, it acts as a strong group to provide a good shape to the global economic order, right? देखिए, मेजरली आप पास्ट में देखें, इन द पास्ट द मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी हैज बीन कंट्रोल्ड बाय वेस्ट or the West led institutions. Can you tell me what do you understand by West and the West led institutions? Please type it in the comment box. What do you understand by this? Let me know. What do you understand by the term that the global economic decision making was controlled by West and the West led institutions in the past? Yes, Kanu, it's IMF and World Bank. Not UN exactly. So see, West signifies USA and European nations, right? Western led institutions signify World Bank and IMF majorly, right? Western led financial institutions. ठीक है? So you see, from 1990s, the control of the world economy was majorly with these countries and with these institutions. ठीक है, आपको लोन लेना है, आपको इन्वेस्टमेंट्स चाहिए, आपको ट्रेड करनी है, एवरीवेयर द कंट्रोल एंड द रोल ऑफ दीज institutions and countries was dominant, right? And now BRICS provided as an alternative to the West-led economic order. इसको West-led economic order आप कह सकते हैं, where the Western nations and institutions play a major role in policy making, in regulation, in provision services, right? Now BRICS came up with the idea of providing an alternative to such a economic order, right? समझ आ गया ये? How BRICS is acting as a major power now in shaping the global economic policies and global economic decision making, right? यहाँ पे बहुत सारी strong economies, these 5 strong economies have come together to shape the global economic policies, right? So that is what we are saying, that BRICS is relevant because it is shaping the global economic order in a major way. इसकी आप मुझे examples दे सकते हैं. If you have understood this point, can you tell me with what type of institutions or measures now BRICS is trying to shape the global economic order? What non-Western alternatives is BRICS providing to the entire world? Can you tell me this? If you have understand the, if you have understood how BRICS is relevant for the global economic order. Try to think on these lines. Kanu, do you think that is the name of the bank? That is the exact name? Rushi, right? Amit, right? Kanu, you are right though, but the name is not exactly this. Shreyas, no, the name of the bank is wrong. Amit, you are right. Right? So, one example of BRICS acting as an alternative to the global economic order is NDB. That means, that is what? बताइए, full form of NDB, Amit? Yes. Yes, Mahi, that's right. It is New Development Bank. Right? Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is different. Asian Development Bank is different. Led by Japan, led by China, right? But this is different from the BRICS Bank. The BRICS Bank, that is NDB, New Development Bank. Right? तो पहले सारा फाइनेंस, सारा लोन, सारा ट्रेड would pass through these institutions. But now BRICS is providing an alternative to the global economy by creating institutions like New Development Bank. अब ये लोगों countries को finance देगा. New Development Bank, a non-Western bank. Right? They are also, thinking of creating a contingency reserve to help the member countries. They are also thinking about currency, swap agreements. So there are many economic non-Western initiatives that are being introduced by BRICS to provide an alternative to the West led economic order of the world. ठीक है, ताकि सिर्फ वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज ही दुनिया की इकोनॉमी को डोमिनेट ना करें, नॉन वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज को भी ग्लोबल इकोनॉमिक रूल मेकिंग में हिस्सा मिले. ठीक है, आई होप दिस पॉइंट इज क्लियर. Yes, Ramesh, I am trying to keep it a mix of Hindi and English so that it helps every student. ठीक है, तो बेसिक अंडरलाइनिंग आइडिया यही है यहाँ पे कि ब्रिक्स कंट्रीज नॉन वेस्टर्न ऑल्टरनेटिव्स प्रोवाइड करना चाहते हैं. यस अमित, दैट इज राइट. राइट, सो दैट इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट relevance of BRICS in this era of the world. Right. Third is poverty reduction. Mein the role that has been played by BRICS in poverty reduction has been huge. You see countries like China, India, Brazil and even South Africa, they have had the largest shares of poverty in the world. ठीक है, apart from African countries, these countries have housed majority of the poor population in the world. Right, so now these countries are also coming together to solve the poverty issue of their own countries and also the other countries of the world. Right, how they do that? By providing developmental finance to the countries in need, whether it be the member countries or the non member countries. ठीक है, तो ये पॉवर्टी रिडक्शन में भी हेल्प कर रहे हैं मेंबर कंट्रीज को भी और नॉन मेंबर अफ्रीकन नेशंस को भी, बाय प्रोवाइडिंग देम डेवलपमेंटल फाइनेंस. उन्हें पैसा दे रहे हैं कि वो रोड्स बना सके, स्कूल्स बना सके, हेल्थ सेंटर्स बना सके. ये सारे ही बेसिक, दीज आर द बेसिक रिक्वायरमेंट्स, हेल्थ, एजुकेशन, न्यूट्रिशन, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ऑफ a developed nation where the poverty levels are low. Right, so that is how BRICS is also working towards reduction of poverty around the world. Right, and finally it has acted as the voice of developing nations. जैसे मैंने आपको इस पॉइंट में समझाया that the world decision making has been dominated by Western countries, European countries and Western institutions. Right, now BRICS acts as a grouping that provides the non-Western perspective. ठीक है, सारी जगह it has become the voice of developing nations. You see India, China, all these are developing nations, so they use BRICS as a means to raise the voice of developing countries. Right, so that is why also BRICS is very relevant. Right, so please make a note of all these points. You can use these points whenever there is a question on BRICS. ठीक है, analysis based question में you can use these points. Right, now so what have been the achievements of the cooperation that is happening among the BRIC members? Right, so the first cooperation achievement that we have already discussed, establishment of new development bank. Right, now this bank finances development projects around the world. Right, infrastructure finance, education finance, health finance, everything is provided by this bank. Right, as it is written that since 2015 when it was first launched, this grouping has funded around, has given a funding of around $30 billion to the projects happening in various nations of the world. Right, so that is how this grouping is very relevant for the world. Right, also in the space sector, if you see, the grouping has cooperated a lot. Space may we have already, if you have studied science and technology or even history to some extent, you will understand that the relevance of space sector is very high. जब नेहरू जी ने या जब इंडिया was trying to put money into space, it was criticized a lot कि हमारे हमारे देश में इतनी गरीबी है, भूखमरी है, why are we putting money into sectors like space? right? But jab satellites launch hui, then we got to know that through these satellites we can take education to the remote corners of the country, we can take health to the remote corners of the country, we can take telecommunication to the remote corners of the country, we can take radios to the remote corners of the country, right? So the space sector is very important for development of any nation, and that is why these countries are also cooperating on creating an effective constellation of satellites for the member countries, right? And the next major achievement is working on climate change, right? You see, in today's world, no topic gets completed about discussion on climate change, because climate change is impacting each and every area around the world. You see, agriculture, industry, society, women, any political, social, economic sector you think about, there will be impact of climate change on that, on that area, right? So these countries are also cooperating to meet the challenges that have been posed by climate change for all the countries, right? So these are the major achievements. You can also add more points as you keep reading in multiple articles about BRICS, keep adding more points to this discussion, right, with concrete examples, right? Now if there are there is a grouping and it is working to some extent, there will be some issues also. Black and white हमेशा होता है, benefits होते हैं तो नुकसान भी होते हैं, वैसे ही BRICS में भी there are achievements but there are also issues or challenges also that BRICS face. So the very first issue with BRICS is that it is a bloc that remains constrained by differences, and this picture says it all, right? BRICS के member countries हैं China और India, the two countries that are kind of in a face off in this time, right? Galwan incident we have already seen, the banning of Chinese app in India we have already seen, the attempts of Chinese governments to harm India in cyber sector, economic sector, geopolitical sector, boundary sector we have already seen, right? So when two enemies, you can say, they are sitting in a similar group with competing interest, ठीक है? एक तरफ चाइना पूरे साउथ एशिया को कंट्रोल करना चाहता है, इट वांट्स इंडिया आल्सो टू बी सबसर्विएंट टू चाइना, बट इंडिया is not letting that happen, right? So what will happen? Do you think BRICS will be able to reach at major consensus based solutions, right? So there will always be conflicts on some or the other matters because the interest of the two member countries, they diverge. जैसे कि एग्जाम्पल आप लीजिए, इंडिया इज अ मेंबर दैट वांट्स एंट्री इनटू द यूएन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल, while China is a dominant country that opposes the entry of India into UN Security Council, ठीक है? So that means BRICS as a grouping cannot support UN reforms in an effective way. यूएन को रिफॉर्म्स की बहुत ज़रूरत है 75 सालों से, सिंस 75 years देयर हैव बीन नो सिग्निफिकेंट रिफॉर्म्स इन यूएन एज अ बॉडी, एज एन इंस्टीट्यूशन, and that is where is the need, jahan because the interests of the member countries is not same, that means they will not be able to raise such global issues in the world, right? So that is the major issue with the grouping, कि members में consensus ही नहीं है तो कैसे ये grouping effective हो सकती है? आपस में ही लड़ते रहेंगे, कोई भी global issue में they cannot come together, right? Second is that BRICS, although is trying to act as an economic alternative for the world, but it has not been much successful. एनडीबी एस्टैब्लिश किया है, एनडीबी ने थोड़े बहुत लोन्स दिए हैं, बट can that loans compete with the loans that have been given out by World Bank or IMF? Where does NDB stands in front of these institutions? This is an example of how BRICS has still much to do to act as an alternative for the world against the Western dominance. Right? समझ आ रहा है? How is BRICS failing in this scenario? ब्रिक्स को अगर एज एन इकोनॉमिक ऑल्टरनेटिव बनना है या इकोनॉमिक ट्रेडिंग ब्लॉक भी बनना है, देर इज मच मोर दैट ब्रिक्स नीड टू डू. फर्स्टली तो कंट्रीज के बीच में जो लड़ाइयाँ हैं उनको ही ख़त्म करना ज़रूरी है. सेकेंड इज दैट more focus, more cooperation is needed to act as an alternative. Right? Third point also follows from this discussion. The new development bank has been established, but it has still to do much to compete with the Western institutions. ठीक है, NDB सेट तो कर दिया है, but वो सक्सेसफुल कितना है, that is the question. Right? So these are the major issues with the grouping. Right? Also, the fourth issue is that China is trying to bring more members to the grouping, creating a BRICS plus institution. Right? But see, it wants to give entry to countries like Pakistan, and we all know that Pakistan and India cannot sit together in a grouping and make effective solutions. ठीक है, India opposes the entry of Pakistan in BRICS, right? So that way also this BRICS plus approach of China is also opposed by India. That creates a challenge for BRICS, right? Finally, and the very important issue is how will India manage its ties with US, Japan or Australia, you can say on one hand, majorly US, and Russia and China on the other hand. On one side, India is increasing its engagement with US and US-led institutions or mechanisms like Quad. On the other hand, it also wants to cooperate with institutions led by these countries which are direct opponents to USA. तो चाहे SCO हो, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, चाहे BRICS हो, both face the similar challenge that how will India manage these two contradicting parties. Right? India cannot take sides because India has a lot of interests involved in on the both the sides. But how will it maintain a balance of ties with both these sides? Right? So this is also a very important geopolitical point. Try to understand them well. I hope you have understood all these points. Make a note of all these points and use them in your answers. Right? Presence of China, will it create problem for India in future? So see, India is already facing problems wherever China is present. So in future also it will face a problem, but for BRICS you can say that BRICS provides a platform for India to sit with China and iron out or solve its differences. ठीक है, तो चाइना से चैलेंज तो हमेशा ही रहेगा इंडिया को, SCO में भी, ब्रिक्स में भी, wherever China is present. But these platforms also provide an opportunity for India to sit with the Chinese leaders and work on the relationship, reduce the hostility and increase the bonhomie. Right? These are all technical words related to international relations. That is why I am using them here. Do not consider them as English vocabulary, heavy English vocabulary. These are technical international relations words that I am using so that you can add them to your vocabulary when you are writing answers. That is what gives more good shape to your answers. Right? So that is how. I hope this is clear to you. Akshay? Right? So the Pratik, you are asking that what's the solution? The solution is to keep working on the relationship, right? As far as possible, India will try to cooperate with China. If China is not ready to bend at any point, then there is no solution. दोनों ही sides को ये कोशिश करती रहनी पड़ेगी that they are able to cooperate. That is why you see China is ready to sit with India in the grouping. China also does not want to make its relations very severe with India. India also does not want to increase hostility with China. So that is why both parties are sitting on one table, because they have the common intent to work on the common areas, reduce the hostility and increase bonhomie, as I told you, right? Right now, so the latest summit, that is the 14th summit, what what are the outcomes of this 14th summit? So the major issue that the world today is facing is the Russia Ukraine war. तो अगर इनकी मीटिंग हो रही है तो उसके बारे में तो बात करनी ही करनी थी. तो सबसे पहला कंसर्न था ऑन यूक्रेन, राइट? यूक्रेन में इतनी डिवास्टेशन हो रही है, सो ब्रिक्स का उस पर क्या स्टैंड रहेगा, राइट? यू सी रशिया इज अ मेंबर ऑफ ब्रिक्स, and both the countries, leading countries, that is India and China, they have interest in good relations with Russia, right? So BRICS as a grouping cannot have a harsh stand against Russia. So that is why the outcome here of the 14th summit is also a neutral stand taken by the summit और दी ग्रुपिंग, राइट? बस उन्होंने कुछ एडवर्स रिएक्शन या रिस्पॉन्स रशिया के अगेंस्ट नहीं दिया है. जस्ट जर्नली दे हैव सेड दैट वी सपोर्ट पीस, सॉवरेनिटी एंड टेरिटोरियल इंटीग्रिटी ऑफ अ नेशन. ठीक है, रशिया के साथ इंडिया चाइना दोनों के ही इंटरेस्ट बहुत अलाइंड है. तो both the countries do not want to harm their relations with Russia. That is why a neutral stand on Ukraine has been taken, right? The second outcome is that a BRICS think tank has been thought of. BRICS is trying to network all the think tanks in the member countries with regard to finance. Think tank क्या होता है? Research institutions, you can understand it like an research institution. ठीक है, think tank, thinking वाली institution, right? तो अब BRICS क्या करना चाहता है? That it wants to create a network of such research institutions that are involved in the financial sector, ताकि better policies financial बनाई जा सके, growth पे focus किया जा सके, एक दूसरे से learning की जाए, right? Right. The third is that India is trying to promote startups within the country and at international level also. That is why India is proposing for a BRICS startup event to happen in India, so that all the startups from the member countries, they can come and share knowledge and techniques with each other. That is the important outcome. The fourth is that India has said that all the countries need to cooperate on economic level to overcome the impacts of the pandemic. कोविड ने बहुत इम्पैक्ट किया है, स्पेशली इंडिया, चाइना, अफ्रीका पे, राइट? सो व्हाट इज इंडिया सेइंग? दैट ऑल द ब्रिक्स नेशंस, दे शुड ट्राई टू जॉइन हैंड्स टू कॉम्बैट द इम्पैक्ट्स ऑफ कोविड, राइट? और चाइना ने क्या कहा कि हमें कोल्ड वॉर मेंटालिटी को हटाना है, पावर पॉलिटिक्स को हटाना है, एंड वी नीड टू कोऑपरेट विद ईच अदर, सिग्नलिंग टुवर्ड्स यूएसए एंड इंडिया ऑल्सो मे बी दैट वी डू नॉट हैव टू बी ऑन इन अ कोल्ड वॉर रेस, right, where we are at war with each other, maybe not actually fighting. We need to create peaceful world, right? So the joke here is that China itself is the reason of the cold war mentality, and it preaches to others to not do the same, right? Bas, that is a point that you can use. Also, terrorism is an area where the BRICS has called for stronger cooperation and for finalization of कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव कन्वेंशन ऑन इंटरनेशनल टेररिज्म। ठीक है, यूएन में देखिए डिफरेंट अग्रीमेंट्स होते हैं टू फाइट डिफरेंट इविल्स इन द वर्ल्ड, जैसे कि ड्रग ट्रैफिकिंग पे है, चाइल्ड लेबर पे है। लास्ट क्लास में हमने डिस्कस किया था ILO के थ्रू वी हैव कन्वेंशन 182 राइट 138 विद रिगार्ड टू चाइल्ड लेबर। इन द सिमिलर फैशन देयर इज अ डिमांड दैट UN शुड वर्क to fight against terrorism by adopting a comprehensive convention on international terrorism। ठीक है, बस but in the countries there is no consensus on what should be the features of this CCIT। किसी दिन this also we will discuss, this is also very important। terrorism की definition ये decide नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, terrorist funding को कैसे financing को कैसे control करना है वो नहीं decide कर रहे हैं। so that is why a strong framework against terrorism is lacking in the world। तो ये कंट्रीज क्या कह रही हैं, दैट वी वांट दैट UN एंड मेंबर कंट्रीज शुड वर्क टू fight the issue of terrorism and bring a strong framework like CCIT। ठीक है, so that is the 6th you can say outcome of the 14th summit, right? so you can also make remember these points। जब भी आपके पास ब्रिक्स का क्वेश्चन आए तो 14th समिट के आउटकम्स में यू कैन राइट दीज पॉइंट्स, राइट? Now seize the mains, as you know you have to write about this question on our website, the answer will be evaluated and you can get the feedback। discuss the relevance of BRICS in the changing geopolitical scenario, right? try to write this answer, right? now we are already out of time for this session, we'll discuss this topic again, an important one, in the next class, right? if you have any doubt please post it in the comment section, we'll try to answer it। thank you so much for joining।